My name is Eleanor. I am 62 years old living in Tampa, Florida. For most of my life, I truly believed that being a mother meant giving everything, every ounce of myself for my child. I wore that belief like a badge of honor, convinced that sacrifice was just part of the job. But standing there in my kitchen that morning, staring at the envelope in my hands, I realized how horribly wrong I had been. It was just another Wednesday. The Florida sun was pouring through the blinds, the smell of my morning coffee still lingering in the air. The mail sat in a neat pile on the kitchen table, mostly junk, until my eyes caught the bold lettering on one envelope. Hillsborough County Clerk of Court. I felt that little pinch of anxiety, the kind you get when you think maybe it's jury duty or a tax notice. Nothing could have prepared me for what was inside. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. The first line knocked the breath clean out of me. Notification of property transfer due to owner's death. For a moment, I just stared at it blinking, thinking maybe I read it wrong. Owner's death, whose death my heart started pounding heavy and loud, like it was trying to climb out of my chest. I scanned the document, my eyes moving too fast to make sense of it at first. Legal terms blurred into one another, but one phrase hit me square in the gut. Pursuant to the attached certificate of death, the estate of Eleanor Marie Dawson has been processed for property reassignment. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. This had to be some horrible clerical mistake. Some other Eleanor. Someone else entirely. My breath came shallow, my palms slick with sweat. I flipped to the next page, and that's when I saw it. My name. My full name. My date of birth. The official seal of the county pressed into the corner of the page like some cruel stamp of finality. According to the state of Florida, I was dead. I sat down hard in the chair, feeling the world tilt beneath me. The sound of the refrigerator humming was suddenly deafening. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, quick and uneven. My hands were shaking so badly that the paper crinkled between my fingers. I tried to focus, tried to breathe, but my brain kept repeating one impossible sentence. I am dead. I read it again, slower this time, begging for the words to change. But they didn't. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a glitch in some database. Someone had declared me dead. Someone had submitted a death certificate in my name. And whoever did it now owned my home. My eyes darted down the page, scanning for clues. There it was. The name of the new property owner. Jason Dawson. My son. My only child. For a split second, everything stopped. The air left the room. My ears buzzed with silence, so thick it felt suffocating. My fingers went numb. My whole body just froze. No. No. This couldn't be real. There had to be some explanation. Maybe a terrible misunderstanding. Maybe the court mixed up paperwork. Maybe Jason filed something without realizing what it meant. I told myself every lie I could think of just to hold back the rising wave of panic swelling in my chest. I stood up the chair, scraping against the tile. My knees felt weak, like they might give out from under me. I grabbed my phone with clammy hands, scrolling to Jason's number. My thumb hovered over the call button, trembling. I pressed it. It rang and rang. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. My stomach twisted so tight it hurt. I felt the walls closing in around me, the familiar warmth of my kitchen turning cold and hostile, like I didn't belong here anymore. Like the house knew I was no longer the owner. I sat back down, gripping the letter so hard the paper nearly tore. A hot wave of nausea rolled over me. My mind raced with questions that had no answers. How long had this been in motion? How could my own son? No! I couldn't even finish the thought. My mouth went dry. My hands trembled. I blinked back the sting in my eyes, refusing to let the tears fall. Not yet. Yet. I reached for the second page, some part of me desperate for anything that would prove this wrong. But every line, every seal, every signature told me the same thing. I was dead. On paper, in the eyes of the law, I no longer existed. And my son had made it so. For a long time, I just sat there staring at nothing, feeling the weight of betrayal press against my chest. The familiar hum of the ceiling fan sounded like it was 100 miles away. The life I thought I knew cracked open in an instant, and there I was standing at the edge, wondering how everything could collapse so quickly. I wasn't just grieving the idea that my son had done this. I was grieving myself, my own erasure. My existence stripped away with the stroke of a pen. And in that moment, one awful truth began to settle in. If I was dead to him, then maybe it was time to start acting like it. Looking back now, I guess the warning signs were always there. But when you love someone, truly love them, you don't see the cracks until the whole thing starts to crumble. My story with Jason started long before any betrayal, long before lawyers and court papers. It started with a little boy who once thought I hung the moon. I became a single mother when Jason was barely 2. His father walked out one cold November evening, left nothing behind but a half-packed suitcase and a note that simply said he wasn't cut out for family life. There was no time to sit and grieve or ask why. Life had bills to pay, mouths to feed, and Jason needed me more than anyone ever had. I took a job as a night shift nurse at Tampa General. It wasn't glamorous. It was long, grueling, and lonely. I worked weekends, holidays, birthdays, anything that paid overtime. I used to whisper to myself during those 12-hour shifts that it was all worth it because every dollar meant Jason had a shot at something better. I remember his little face pressed against the window when I'd come home in the morning. His tiny hands waving frantically, his smile so big it made my tired feet feel just a little less heavy. Pancakes on Saturday mornings were our tradition. No matter how exhausted I was, I never skipped it. Just me and him, 2 scrambled eggs, a stack of pancakes, and his endless stories about dinosaurs or whatever superhero he loved that week. There were times when money was so tight, it felt like the walls were closing in. I skipped buying new shoes more times than I could count. I patched holes in my scrubs and made dinner out of whatever was left in the pantry. But Jason never knew. He never saw the strain because I refused to let him carry even a shred of that weight. When he was 8, I finally saved enough to put a down payment on our little house in Tampa. It wasn't fancy, but it had a tiny porch, a patchy lawn, and enough space for Jason to have a room all to himself. I remember the day we moved in. He ran from room to room like it was a castle, his laughter echoing off bare walls. That house was supposed to be our forever. As Jason grew older, I watched him become this smart, driven young man. He graduated top of his class, got into a good college, and I was there in the front row clapping louder than anyone. I remember thinking, this is it. All those sleepless nights, all the sacrifices, it's all been worth it. My boy was going to build the life I never could. When Jason met Kendra, I was happy for him. She seemed sweet at first, polite, thoughtful. The kind of girl who brought flowers on Mother's Day and helped clear the dishes after dinner. But looking back now, I wonder if I was just seeing what I wanted to see. After they married, things started to shift. The calls became less frequent. The visits were shorter, always rushed. Suddenly, there were excuses. Work was crazy. They were remodeling. They were just so busy. Busy became the new normal. I brushed it off in the beginning. Told myself it was just part of growing up, part of building a new family. I didn't want to be that mother who clung too tightly, who made them feel guilty for living their own lives. But the silence started to stretch longer. Holidays became texts instead of phone calls. Birthdays were reduced to quick messages with digital balloons. I started noticing a pattern. The only time my phone really lit up with Jason's name was when something was wrong, when the car broke down, when a business investment fell through, when they were short on rent because Kendra left her job. Every time I opened my checkbook without hesitation, because that's what mothers do. I told myself it was temporary, that once things settled, the warm Sunday dinners would come back. That someday we'd sit on that old porch swing together, like we used to, sipping sweet tea, talking about nothing and everything. But those days never came. The house that once echoed with Jason's laughter grew quieter. My living room stayed perfectly neat because no one came by to mess it up. I started leaving the porch light on longer than I needed to, as if maybe the glow would remind him this was still home. What hurt more than the distance was the way the warmth faded without any real goodbye. There was no fight, no big falling out. Just a slow, steady pulling away, until I felt like a faded photograph sitting in a drawer no one opened anymore. Still, I told myself it was okay. As long as he was happy. As long as he was building a good life. Because that's what I raised him for, wasn't it? To grow. To thrive. To not need me forever. But now, holding that letter in my hands, reading that I was dead in the eyes of the law, I realized something I had never wanted to admit. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't just stopped needing me. Maybe he decided I was disposable. It didn't happen all at once. Looking back, it was a slow drip of little moments that didn't feel like much on their own, but somehow piled up until the weight became unbearable. At first, it was just Jason asking for help, a small favor here, a little assistance there, always wrapped in words that made it sound temporary, harmless. He showed up one afternoon with that charming smile of his, the one he used as a kid when he wanted something. He sat at my kitchen table, hands folded, eyes soft. He explained that he and Kendra were applying for a small business loan. Something about expanding her online boutique, making a real future for themselves. But the bank needed a cosigner. Just for a short time, just until the business took off. I hesitated, but before I could voice it, Jason reached across the table, squeezed my hands, and told me how much it meant to him that I believed in them. I signed. Of course I signed. Because that's what mothers do. We believe. We trust. Then came the next ask. A few months later, Jason explained that handling bills was getting complicated. Kendra was juggling finances, he was managing their accounts, and wouldn't it just be simpler if he helped oversee mine too? He framed it like a kindness, like taking something off my plate. He said he was just trying to make sure I didn't get overwhelmed with online banking or accidentally miss a payment. At first, it was little things. He set up online access to my accounts, offered to handle the mortgage payments, utilities, insurance. I felt a little uneasy, but then Kendra chimed in, smiling gently, telling me how it was normal these days for kids to help their aging parents. She always had a way of making her words sound sweet, even when they weren't. She would laugh softly and say things like, "You don't need much money at your age anyway." I brushed it off. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just being stubborn. The world was getting more complicated, everything was digital now, and maybe letting Jason take the reins was simply the sensible thing to do. But then strange things started happening. I'd noticed small withdrawals I didn't remember making. Credit card statements would arrive with charges I couldn't explain. Jason always had an answer. "Oh, that was for the lawn service I forgot to cancel. That was a subscription renewal I probably missed." He'd wave his hand like it was nothing, like I was making a big deal out of something insignificant. I started to feel foolish for even asking. Maybe I was getting forgetful. Maybe age really was catching up to me in ways I didn't want to admit. I told myself not to be paranoid. I told myself to trust my son. The requests became more frequent. Jason asked if I could help with a second loan. The first one didn't pan out as expected. Kendra's business was struggling. The economy was rough. He spun it as a family pulling together, surviving tough times. And every time he asked, it came with that subtle undercurrent that made me feel like saying no would be cruel, selfish even. I noticed how conversations shifted. There was less small talk, less warmth. Calls were about money, about paperwork, about whether I had signed this or transferred that. When I brought up seeing them having dinner together, there was always an excuse. Too busy. Swamped. Maybe next weekend. I began feeling like a burden in my own family. Like my worth was shrinking down to whatever was left in my bank account. I started questioning myself constantly. Was I imagining things? Was this just how families operated? Now Kendra always smiled, that same careful smile, reassuring me in a tone that was both sweet and sharp. She would remind me how lucky I was to have them looking out for me, how not every parent had kids willing to step up like Jason did. There were moments I tried to speak up, moments where something inside me whispered that this wasn't right. But then Jason would look at me with that same boyish face I once kissed goodnight 1,000 times, and all my doubts would fold in on themselves. I would hear myself apologizing for even asking, for doubting him. But deep down, something started to shift, quietly, without me wanting it to. A creeping sense of wrongness that I couldn't shake. Like the floor beneath me was starting to tilt, like I was slowly being pushed out of my own life. I caught him one evening going through my mail. When I asked why, he laughed and said he was just checking for anything important, saving me the trouble. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. I told myself they were just stressed. That life was hard. That once things got better, everything would go back to how it used to be. But part of me, the part I had spent years silencing, was starting to whisper something I didn't want to hear. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. I sat there clutching the letter like it was some sort of bad joke waiting to reveal its punchline. But no punchline came. My name, my birth date, my property, all stamped with a sentence that chilled me to the bone. Deceased. According to this document, I no longer existed. My hands trembled so badly, I could hardly hold the paper straight. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out every other sound in the room. I kept reading the same line over and over, thinking maybe the words would somehow change if I just stared hard enough. But they didn't. Jason. My mind snapped straight to him. There had to be a mistake. This had to be some mix-up, some clerical error. I grabbed my phone fingers, shaking, and hit his number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again, pressing harder, like somehow that would force him to answer. Still nothing. I texted him. Call me now? Urgent. No response. A cold dread crawled up my spine. My stomach twisted into knots so tight I could barely breathe. I called again and again, my breaths turning shallow, my hands clammy. Jason wasn't picking up. Jason wasn't even trying. I stood up so fast, my chair screeched against the floor. My head spun. I grabbed my keys without thinking and walked straight out the door. My hands gripped the steering wheel like a vice as I drove toward his house, every mile heavier than the last. The entire drive I told myself there had to be an explanation. There had to be. When I turned onto his street, something felt off. There were cars parked along both sides more than usual. Laughter floated through the air, carried by the breeze. Music. Glasses clinking. Voices, happy voices spilling out onto the sidewalk. I pulled up to the curb, engine still running, and just sat there. My heart sank lower with every second. I stared at Jason's house. balloons, streamers. People gathered in clusters on the lawn, chatting, drinking, laughing like it was the happiest day of their lives. My legs felt like lead as I stepped out of the car. Every part of me screamed not to go forward, to just turn around, but I couldn't. My feet moved on their own. I walked closer until I could hear the words clearly. Jason's voice. Toasting. I heard him laugh. I heard him say the words that shattered me into pieces I don't think we'll ever fit back together. To a brighter future. To new beginnings. And to my late mother, whose passing, though sad, has allowed us to finally move forward. My knees buckled. My hands shot to my mouth. I staggered back like the wind had been punched right out of me. My ears rang. My skin burned. Every sound twisted into something sharp, something cruel. I stood there, frozen, half hidden behind a tree, watching my son raise a glass to my death. Watching him smile, surrounded by friends and neighbors, celebrating the fact that I was gone. Gone according to him. A woman nearby asked if anyone had seen Kendra. Another voice chimed in, saying she was inside finalizing the paperwork. The paperwork. My house. My savings. My life. All being transferred like I was just some old piece of furniture someone left on the curb. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so violently I had to press them against my thighs just to stay upright. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm up there and demand an answer. But my feet wouldn't move. My voice wouldn't come. I kept staring at Jason's face, searching for something, anything. A flicker of guilt. A shadow of regret. But there was nothing. Just happiness. Relief even. Like the weight of me had finally been lifted from his life. Then I saw Kendra step out onto the porch, a stack of documents in her hands. She was laughing, adjusting her sunglasses, chatting with someone about how everything was finally official. My blood turned ice cold. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was planned. This was deliberate. My own son had filed a false death certificate. My own son had declared me dead so he could steal everything I spent my whole life building. I staggered back toward the car, barely feeling my feet hit the ground. The sound of laughter chased me all the way there. I gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, staring straight ahead, but seeing nothing. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like a stranger. Pale. Shaking. Hollow. A wave of nausea rolled over me so strong I thought I might throw up right there. I had believed every lie. Every excuse. Every empty smile. And this was what it led to. A party celebrating my death. As I sat there frozen, something inside me cracked. Not the kind of crack that breaks. The kind that lets something else through. Something harder. Something sharper. If I was dead to them, maybe it was time to become exactly that. I sat in the car for what felt like forever, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my fingers ached. My vision blurred not from the sunlight, but from the sting of tears that refused to fall. Not yet. Somewhere between heartbreak and disbelief, something shifted inside me. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater, drew in a shaky breath, and told myself one thing. No one was coming to save me. If I was going to survive this, it had to be me. When I finally pulled away from Jason's house, I didn't look back. I let the weight of what I'd just witnessed settle like a stone in my chest, but I didn't let it drown me. My mind was already spinning, moving from grief to calculation. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Not anymore. The first place I went wasn't home. It was the public library downtown. Strange how instinct kicked in. Something about the smell of old books, the hum of quiet conversations, and the click of computer keys grounded me. I sat at one of the dusty terminals and typed out the words that felt as foreign as they were terrifying. Inheritance fraud. False death certificate. Identity theft. The results hit me like a second slap. Case after case of elderly parents being stripped of everything by their own children. Victims who trusted too much, who handed over power out of love and paid the price in betrayal. But there were also stories of people who fought back, who clawed their way out of the grave someone else dug for them. I read every word, studied every detail. I wasn't just reading anymore. I was learning. Names of lawyers popped up in articles and forums, but one name stuck out to me more than the others. Howard Franklin, a name I hadn't spoken in years. He used to live 2 doors down from me back when Jason was little. A good man. A sharp mind. I remembered hearing someone at church mention he had opened his own practice. Elder law. Estate disputes. Fraud. I called him before I could talk myself out of it. The moment I heard his voice, something inside me unclenched. I told him everything. No sugarcoating. No skipping the ugly parts. Just the brutal, humiliating truth. To his credit, he didn't interrupt. He didn't offer cheap sympathy. He just listened. When I finished, there was a pause, then his voice lowered. He told me to come in. Right now. Sitting across from Howard in his modest office felt like stepping into a different world. The walls were lined with books. His desk was cluttered with files and half-drunk cups of coffee. He didn't look at me like I was some helpless old woman. He looked at me like a client. Someone with a fight ahead. Someone worth fighting for. We started from the beginning. He asked for every document I had. Bank statements, property deeds, any correspondence with Jason. I handed him the court letter first. His eyes darkened the moment he read the words. He flipped through the rest, quickly shaking his head more than once. His first question hit hard. Do you have any idea how long this has been going on? I didn't. Not really. But as we pulled apart the threads, the ugly picture became clearer. The forged death certificate. The fake signatures on property transfer forms. The pattern of unauthorized withdrawals from my accounts, disguised as routine expenses. It was worse than I imagined. Howard printed out power of attorney forms, contracts, loan applications, all the ones Jason had me sign over the past few years. Side by side, his legal assistant compared my real signature to the ones on the fraudulent documents. Her face tightened as she pointed out the discrepancies. Letters that didn't match. Slants in the handwriting that were off. Even the pressure of the pen stroke was wrong. But we needed more. Solid proof. A paper trail that couldn't be argued away. Howard guided me step by step. We contacted the county clerk to request copies of the death certificate. We pulled property transaction records. He walked me through filing official reports with the local police and the fraud division. It was exhausting. It was humiliating. It was terrifying. But it was also the first time in months, maybe years, that I felt something other than helpless. Every form I signed with Howard, every piece of evidence we added to the file, it felt like reclaiming a little part of myself. Jason had no idea, no clue that his dead mother was quietly resurrecting herself one document at a time. No clue that I was watching now, watching everything. I stopped answering his calls. Not that there were many. Just a few automated bank alerts forwarded to me by mistake. I changed my passwords, froze my accounts, closed the joint ones he had opened without my knowledge. At night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad scribbling notes, questions, timelines. The same table where Jason once did his homework, where we shared pancake breakfasts. Now it was my war room. I still cried sometimes, mostly out of sheer exhaustion. But it wasn't the same kind of crying. It wasn't the hollow, broken sobs of someone who had been betrayed. It was the release of someone who was sharpening herself into something stronger. Jason thought I was gone, buried, out of the picture. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that the dead don't stay quiet forever. The sky was blindingly blue as I pulled up to Jason's house. Not a single cloud, not a single hint of what was about to happen. Cars lined the driveway and spilled down both sides of the street. I sat there for a moment, hands steady on the wheel, listening to the muffled sounds of music and laughter drifting through the open windows. I stepped out and straightened my jacket. In my hands was the folder. Thick, heavy, packed with every document, every signature, every bank statement, and every lie. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked toward the house, each step syncing with the pounding in my chest. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. Pure, sharp focus. As I reached the front porch, I could hear Jason's voice cutting through the crowd. He was giving a speech. His tone was smug, polished, a little too loud. He thanked everyone for coming, thanked Kendra for her support, and then I heard it. That line, the one that sealed everything. He raised his glass and said how grateful he was for the life his late mother had left behind for him. Her passing had been hard, but it opened new doors. A new beginning. The guests clapped. Some murmured words of sympathy. Someone even said she's in a better place now. I tightened my grip on the folder, took a deep breath, and pushed open the front door. The room went dead silent. The music stopped mid-beat. Every glass hovered mid-air. Every mouth hung open. Heads turned. Faces shifted from laughter to confusion to sheer horror. Jason's hand froze mid-toast. His eyes locked on mine, and for a second he didn't move. Just stood there pale as a ghost, staring back at something impossible. His jaw twitched. His fingers trembled. Then came the sound of a glass slipping from someone's hand and shattering against the tile. Kendra was the first to step back, one hand flying to her mouth. Her face drained of every ounce of color, her eyes darting to Jason, like maybe this was his fault to fix, but she already knew it wasn't fixable. I walked in. Slowly, calmly. My heels echoed against the hardwood as every person in that room stepped back like I was contagious. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I just moved right toward the center, right where Jason stood frozen beside the table, stacked with champagne bottles and unsigned contracts. I set the folder down in front of him. The sound of it hitting the table was louder than it should have been. Crisp. Final. I let the silence stretch. Let them all stew in it. Then I looked him dead in the eye and said the words I'd been rehearsing for weeks. Surprise. Your dead mother has arrived. Jason stumbled back a step. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like words were trying to form, but couldn't. His face went from shock to confusion to sheer panic in seconds. Kendra grabbed his arm, whispering something frantic, her head whipping between me and the stunned guests. No one moved. No one breathed. You could have heard a pin drop. I flipped open the folder, letting the first sheet slide into view. The forged death certificate. I pointed to the signature. Then the fake property transfer forms. Then the list of unauthorized withdrawals, complete with timestamps, bank statements, and notations from the fraud investigator Howard had hired. I watched Jason's face crumble in real time. His eyes darted to the papers, to me, then to the open front door, as if maybe he was calculating whether he could run. But his feet wouldn't move. His hands trembled so bad he had to grip the edge of the table just to stay standing. The guests began to murmur. Whispered questions swirled around the room. People glanced at each other, at the documents, at me. Some took a step back like they didn't want to be caught standing too close to him when this all exploded. Kendra let out a small, strangled noise, part gasp, part cry. Her perfect mask cracked right down the middle. She started shaking her head, backing away like if she denied it hard enough it might all go away. I straightened my spine, held my head high, and kept my voice steady. You filed me as dead. You forged my name. You stole everything I built. Every dollar. Every square inch of my home. You lied to this court. To these people. To your own mother. Jason's lips finally moved, stammering, trying to form excuses. It's not what you think. It was a misunderstanding. You don't understand. But the words were thin, weak, hollow. Then the front door opened again. 2 officers stepped inside. Calm, professional. Howard walked right behind them, a stack of legal documents in his hand, eyes locked straight on Jason. The color drained from Jason's face like someone pulled the plug. Kendra collapsed onto the couch, covering her mouth with both hands. The guests, every single one of them, started backing away, quietly edging toward the door, realizing this wasn't a party anymore. This was a crime scene. Jason didn't even resist when the officers walked over. Hands behind his back, cuffs clicked shut. His head dropped, his whole body sagging, as if the weight of what he'd done had finally caught up to him. And maybe for the first time, it actually did. As they read him his rights, I stood there. Shoulders back, chin up, watching. Not a single tear fell. Not a single flicker of doubt remained. The dead mother was very much alive, and she was done being quiet. The click of the handcuffs was sharper than any word ever spoken between us. Jason stood there, head bowed, wrists pinned behind his back, the party decorations swaying quietly above him like some cruel joke. Guests scattered in awkward silence, some pretending to check their phones, others quietly slipping out the door, as if they could erase ever being here. Howard stood firm, handing the officers every page of evidence we had collected. His voice was steady as he explained the forged death certificate, the fraudulent property transfers, the stolen funds. Every detail was laid bare, and there was no room left for denial. No space for Jason's weak excuses or stammered justifications. Kendra dropped onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Her mascara streaked down her face, hands shaking as she muttered over and over that she had no idea. But her name was all over the documents, too. Her signature sat proudly next to Jason's on half the fraudulent forms. She was as much a part of this as he was, whether she wanted to admit it now or not. The officers read Jason his charges: fraud, forgery, identity theft, financial exploitation of an elderly person. Each word hit like a nail into the coffin he had built for himself. His face went pale. His lips trembled. But there was no fight left in him. Not anymore. Another officer stepped aside, making a call to the county records office. Within minutes, a freeze was placed on all financial accounts tied to the fraudulent transfers. The house. The savings. Everything Jason and Kendra thought they had stolen was now locked down under court order. Their illusion of victory crumbled in an instant. I stood there, hands folded, calm, steady. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. My silence said everything. There was a power in simply standing tall while the people who tried to bury me watched their empire of lies collapse around them. Jason barely looked at me as they led him out the door. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was disbelief that the woman he declared dead was the same woman watching him fall. Kendra stayed behind, rocking back and forth on the couch, her face buried in her hands, whispering apologies to no one in particular. Howard turned to me, gave me the smallest nod. It was done. The nightmare was over. Or at least the part where they still held power over me was finished. As the officers pulled away with Jason in the back seat, I stood on that front lawn and breathed. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift off my chest. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I wasn't dead. Not even close. The ones who tried to bury me had no idea I was a seed. I sold the house. The same house I once thought would be my forever. The walls that held memories of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and pancake mornings no longer felt like home. They felt like a shell of something that didn't exist anymore. With the money, I did something I never imagined I would. I started the Eleanor Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women like me. Women who gave everything to their families only to find themselves betrayed and discarded when they were no longer useful. The foundation provides legal support, financial education, and most importantly, a community. A place where no one is treated like a burden. A place where every woman remembers her worth before someone else tries to convince her otherwise. I also bought myself a little house by the beach. Nothing fancy. Just enough. A porch with a swing. A view of the waves. The sound of the ocean rolling in and out like a steady reminder that life moves forward no matter how deep the wounds. Mornings are quiet now. I sip coffee as the sun rises, watching the sky shift from deep blue to soft gold. The air smells like salt and possibility. For the first time in decades, my life belongs entirely to me. Sometimes I think about Jason, about everything that happened. The sting isn't as sharp anymore. What he did was cruel. It was unforgivable. But it no longer defines me. I learned something I wish someone had told me years ago. You don't need anyone's love to be worthy. You don't need their approval, their praise, or their permission to take up space in this world. You just need to remember who you are. And I remember now,